Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps the name Yahweh didn't first emerge at the top of a mountain with Moses? What if I told you that long before Israel existed as a nation, long before the law, the tribes and the prophets, there were already people invoking this sacred name? It might seem strange, even unsettling, but the echo of Yahweh's name resonated through generations even before the first stone tablet was written. And the most surprising part, he was being worshipped by people who weren't Israelites. What you're about to discover might forever change the way you see the history of the Bible. Because this story doesn't begin with Moses. It doesn't begin with Abraham. It begins with a God who has always been present, always revealed himself, and always sought willing hearts, regardless of nation, language, or lineage. So before we dive deeper into this mystery, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment telling me which part surprised you the most. Your participation helps this content reach more people and, who knows, answer questions others didn't even know they had. Now let's embark on this journey together. To understand all of this, we need to go back to the beginning. And when I say beginning, I mean literally back to the first chapters of Genesis. In Genesis 4:26, we read that in the days of Enosh, Adam's grandson, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. And that word Lord, in the original Hebrew, is YHWH, Yahweh. Yes, the same name that God would later reveal to Moses at the burning bush. This is shocking, because we're talking about people who lived thousands of years before Israel was formed. Enosh and his generation were already invoking Yahweh. This means that God's name was known, revered, and worshipped very early on, from the first generations of humanity. How is this possible? The answer might lie in God's very character. Yahweh was never a tribal God. He is the creator of everything and everyone. From Eden onward, he sought fellowship with human beings. It wasn't about an exclusive group, but about hearts that sought him sincerely. The Bible's story repeatedly shows that God reveals himself to those who seek him, no matter where they are. Take Abraham's case, for instance. When God calls him in Genesis 12, he's still in Ur of the Chaldeans, a pagan region full of strange gods and cults. Even so, Abraham hears Yahweh's voice, obeys, and builds an altar to the Lord. Again, Yahweh. Genesis 12:8 makes this clear. Abraham already knew the name. It wasn't a new invention, but a spiritual heritage he carried with him. Now let's leap to Genesis 14 and talk about a character who appears like lightning in the night sky, Melchizedek. He shows up as mysteriously as he does powerfully, king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. He meets Abraham after a battle and blesses him. And what does Abraham do? He gives him a tithe. Yes, Abraham recognizes the spiritual authority of this man. Hebrews 7 explains that Melchizedek was without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, made like the Son of God. This has led many scholars to see him as a messianic figure, a pre-incarnation of Christ. But what matters here is that he was already a priest of Yahweh. Before the law, before the Levitical priesthood, there was already someone ministering before the Most High God. Now think about this with me. If the worship of Yahweh already existed outside Israel's lineage, could other people have known him too? The answer is a resounding yes. Let's look at Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. He was a priest in Midian, a land outside Israelite territory, and yet the Bible describes him as a priest of God. In Exodus 3:1, Moses is tending Jethro's flock when he sees the burning bush. Yahweh speaks to Moses at that moment, but Jethro was already a priest before that. Later, in Exodus 18, Jethro visits Moses and, upon hearing all that Yahweh had done for the people of Israel, he worships, offers sacrifices, and proclaims, "Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all gods." And no one rebukes him. On the contrary, he's welcomed, honored, and shares a sacred meal with Israel's leaders. This shows us something powerful. Yahweh's presence wasn't confined to the desert or the tent of meeting. He was already at work, revealing himself to people in different places, in distinct cultures, because his glory cannot be contained. And it doesn't stop there. Let's go to the book of Job, perhaps the oldest written text in the Bible. Job wasn't an Israelite. He lived in a land called Uz outside Canaan. Even so, he had an intimate relationship with God. He knew the name Yahweh, trusted him as Redeemer, and his faith was profound. In Job 1:21 he declares, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And the Hebrew term used there is once again YHWH. Job speaks with God, cries out for justice, declares, "I know that my Redeemer lives." And this in a time when Israel didn't even exist yet. What does this reveal? That Yahweh was present and active in the lives of those who sought him. Geography didn't matter, but the heart did. Now hold on tight, because this part is truly intriguing. Do you remember Balaam? Yes, the prophet hired to curse Israel, but who ended up prophesying blessings. He lived in Mesopotamia, a land full of idols and occult practices. Even so, in Numbers 22, we see God, Yahweh, speaking directly to him. It wasn't a hunch, it wasn't a vague vision. It was a conversation. God appears and asks, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam responds, referring to Yahweh by name. Yes, Balaam used the covenant name, the name revealed to Moses, Yahweh. And the Bible shows that even though he was someone outside God's people, he recognized divine authority and, at least initially, obeyed the Lord's voice. This might seem confusing. How could someone who wasn't part of God's people hear his voice? But maybe the question should be different. Why do we think God would only speak to an exclusive group? Yahweh never limited himself to a border. He always spoke to those willing to listen. Even though Balaam later strayed due to greed, his story reveals that Yahweh was already known among the nations. His name spread like a whisper among foreign prophets. His deeds echoed in the memories of kings, and his glory was glimpsed even in the darkest corners of the ancient world. This truth changes everything. It shows us that God's plan was always bigger than we imagined, that Yahweh's story didn't begin with Israel, and it certainly doesn't end there. Throughout the Bible, as we start piecing these clues together, a bold and powerful truth emerges. Yahweh was never just the God of one people. He was always the God of all peoples, and his name echoed beyond the mountains of Judah, beyond the walls of Jerusalem, beyond the Sinai desert. Yahweh was in the world, speaking, revealing, seeking. And the question pounding in the depths of your heart now is, why? Why did God choose to act this way, revealing himself to people outside Israel even before giving the law or establishing the covenant? The answer lies in the essence of his character. Yahweh was never exclusivist. He is a father seeking children. He is the creator passionate about his creation. Since Eden, his presence has been universal. He walked with Adam, spoke with Cain, marked generations, even when all of humanity seemed to be heading toward darkness. Think of Enoch. He walked with God, and God took him to himself. Think of Noah, who found favor in the Lord's eyes when the whole earth was corrupt. Think of all those who came before Abraham. None of them were Israelites. And yet, they knew Yahweh, responded to him, walked with him. This truth shatters any limited mindset. The story of salvation isn't a closed journey between God and Israel, but a sweeping plan of redemption for all humanity. Israel was chosen to be a light among the nations, not because God loved the people more, but because he needed a channel to bring light where there was darkness. And even so, the light was already shining here and there, like sparks of revelation. Now come back with me to Balaam's story, because even though he was an ambiguous prophet used for the wrong reasons, God turns the situation around. When Balak tries to use Balaam to curse Israel, what comes out of his mouth are words of blessing. But it doesn't stop there. Balaam prophesies something unbelievable. In Numbers 24:17, he says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise from Israel. This prophecy, coming from a foreign prophet, points to the Messiah. Yahweh was announcing the coming of Jesus not just through Isaiah or Jeremiah, but even through an outsider, someone with questionable motives. This shows us that God's revelation wasn't confined to Israel's official prophets. And if you still doubt that Yahweh was known beyond the Hebrew people, there's more. Take a look at the Magi from the East. Yes, those who appear in the story of Jesus' birth, they weren't Jews. They didn't follow the law of Moses, but they were studying the heavens and interpreting signs. And somehow they knew that a star announced the birth of the King of the Jews. Matthew 2 tells us that these wise men from the East came to worship the child. They brought gifts, they bowed down, and they returned home by another route, warned in dreams not to go back to Herod. Look at that. God speaking to Gentiles in dreams and being worshipped by them from the very beginning of Christ's incarnation. None of this is coincidence. It all points to the same truth. Yahweh was revealing himself to outsiders long before insiders understood what he was doing. And this brings us to a lesson that hits you directly. Maybe you've felt like an outsider before. Someone who didn't grow up in a church, who doesn't know all the traditions, who doesn't fit the religious mold. Maybe you've thought, would God speak to me? Or would he even see me? And the answer, burning like fire in your chest, is yes. He sees you. He's always seen you. Just as he saw Job, as he saw Melchizedek, as he spoke to Balaam and the Magi from the East. God's love isn't limited by geographies or genealogies. His spirit blows where he wills, and his voice is heard by those who seek him with a sincere heart. Remember what Jesus said to the Samaritan woman in John 4, "The hour is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth." He wasn't talking about a place. He wasn't talking about Jerusalem. He was talking about awakened hearts, about people who recognize the truth, even outside the official religious system. That's why this message matters so much, because it invites you to understand that God's story is bigger than you imagine, that he's always been active in the world, that he speaks to everyone, and that he's speaking to you. When Paul is preaching at the Areopagus in Acts 17, he says to the Greeks, "The God who made the world and everything in it is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being." He was speaking to pagans, to philosophers, and he says, "He determined the times and places so that men might seek him, and though groping, find him." That's the essence of Yahweh's revelation outside Israel. He's always been near. He's always let himself be found by those who seek him, even if groping. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have been born in the right place. You just need to seek him truly, because Yahweh, the eternal God, the I Am, continues to reveal himself today. And now we reach the deepest point of all. Yahweh has a name revealed in the New Testament, and that name is Yeshua, Jesus. Jesus' very name in Hebrew means Yahweh saves. He is the incarnation of the promise, the fulfillment of the prophecies, the convergence point between the God of all the earth and the salvation of all humanity. In Jesus, Yahweh didn't limit himself to one people, one religion, one culture. He stretched out his arms on the cross and said, "It is finished. The work is done. The revelation is complete. Salvation is for all." And as it's written in Romans 10:13, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That name is Yahweh, and that name now shines in Yeshua, Jesus Christ. The God who spoke with Enoch, who walked with Noah, who appeared to Melchizedek, who guided Job, who used Balaam, who captivated the Magi, that same God is calling you today. Can you hear his voice? Maybe you felt like a stranger, a spiritual outsider. But today you know Yahweh has always spoken to those who sought him. And he's calling you now. It doesn't matter where you come from, but where your heart is turned. The God who spoke to men and women before Israel even existed is speaking to you. Respond. Seek him. Say yes. And if this message touched your soul, leave it in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to know that God's love goes far beyond borders. Like, subscribe and stand firm. Yahweh is meeting you.